Yeah, we're ready to go, I believe. It's recording. So whenever you're ready, we're going to do about 20 minutes per team. And I'll keep a watch on the time. Try to do 10 minutes for your presentation, 10 minutes Q&A, and we'll see how that goes. But that's usually pretty good.
Okay. All right. Well, hello, everyone. We are the travel group, and in our group is Vincent, Lena, Jerry, and myself, Hannah. Next page. Okay. So after our last presentation, we felt that we still had too many good directions that we could go into. And so we actually reached out to someone in CBG. Her name is Nasham. She works in the innovation department. Really glad we did because we learned a lot from her. But the top three things we learned were the opportunities for contactless things in the airport. Sometimes they have troubles with the elderly getting around and being places they need to be, and just really trying to motivate people to be less selfish and more selfless in their behaviors and interactions. From those three things, we felt most drawn to creating a more contactless environment because when looking back at our graph from last time, a lot of the pain points were in the flight area and had a lot to do with touching and being close to people. So from all our research up to this point, we wanted to go in thinking about the type of person that would have the most difficulties, because if we can design for them, then we should be able to also meet the needs of a more general population as well. So for this instance, the person is a 65-plus-year-old woman who is immune compromised. Specifically, this product is used to mitigate the spread of diseases and alleviate stress on a plane, specifically inside of it. This is done by reducing the need for contact and removing contact where at all possible.
Yeah, so we replotted our user journey and just kind of plotted where we were seeing a lot of pain points as well as touch points. And the two areas that we landed on were boarding and refreshment and food, with us ultimately going more into refreshment and food. And that leads us into our first concept, which was to redesign the back of the seat in an airplane. And Vincent is going to take some of the nurse intervention thinking.
Yeah. So basically, for this first concept one, the back of the seat redesign, we wanted our nurse preventions where we wanted to reduce the contact among passengers and flight attendants. So by already placing food and drinks beforehand in the back pouch, we were kind of disinfecting before and after passengers occupy the seats. And we're reducing the stress and anxiety of catching or spreading viruses around from the surrounding environment when coming into contact with flight attendants. So we're reducing that contact um, by reducing the contact. So with this, we're enhancing the passenger travel experiences with higher health safety protection, or people will be more inclined to travel. And with our education plan, where people are still going to be wearing masks, only taking them off while they're eating or drinking. We're going to have additional announcements from the captain and flight attendants during flights about this new redesign. And we're going to have a safety instructions booklet in front of them so they can kind of learn about this new design.
Yeah, and so this is our design where we have little garbage bags under where we have our normal trays, as well as repositioning where the info slides are located so that they still are there, but they don't interfere with the food. Basically, they're collapsible and folding trays that help to the flight attendants to easily put the food and into the pouches so that the food and snacks so that they're easily accessible after you fold it open, but they can also, once they're done being used, can be folded away. What we want to address with this design is that there was no food served during the pandemic. Adhering with the CDC guidelines of spacing in a plane and airport is difficult. So making sure that people don't have to contact with, like we said, the flight attendants as much as possible. And sometimes you're not sure if the crew is vaccinated. So this takes out some of that ambiguity because you don't have to interact with the flight attendant. like I mentioned, it's a collapsible food pocket. So once all the food has been, consumed, then it can collapse and it can give you more leg room. And also there are specific places where you put the garbage. So there's no ambiguity there as far as where to put your trash or if you have to hold on to it. And for who, the primary user group is those 50 plus travelers. So everything is very easy and accessible. There's no like technology gap where you have to worry about how to use it. And then secondary is flight attendants who will also be a little safer because they don't have to interact with passengers so much. And this brings us on to concept 2, which is built-in shielding. And Lena's got this one.
Yeah, so from the pain points that the passengers feeling not having so much control and to protect themselves in closed spaces in the airplanes, and often feel uncomfortable having close by passengers not wearing the mask when they're eating or drinking, or some that not really compliant with the mask mandate. So the concept number 2, 3, help to resolve these struggles. So this concept is to create more space within the seats and allow passengers having more control over their own health to protect themselves from spreading or catching the virus or any communicable diseases on the airplane. We designed several additional features onto the seats to allow passengers distancing themselves from one another from front to the back and the sides. For health perspective, nursing intervention, this concept is to enhance the health safety by blocking the airflow from front to back, and also provide additional extra privacy within the space of the seats, and to communicate the additional designs or additional features and the new designs to the passengers. The partition is, which is the partition, this is the concept that we're designing. This one is auto disinfected by the UV lights from inside when raising it up. And we're gonna make the passenger know that they will have to raise the partition when they're taking off masks. All of the instructions would be included in the safety procedures as Vincent mentioned in concept 1.
Yep. So this is the two-parter for our concept 2. We wanted to address eating and drinking without a mask because we feel like that was a big pain point that passengers were talking about, where people next to them would be eating or drinking without, there was nothing separating them, and they felt very unsafe when people were eating and drinking. So even though people did have masks, when they had to take them off to eat or drink, this was like a big pain point. And you're unsure if the other passengers have been vaccinated. So this design, on the back of the seat, there is a screen that pulls up, and when it does, there are 2 UV strip lights on either side, so that as it retracts or raises, then you get it auto disinfecting as it pulls up. And then on the bottom, we have another concept where it's more accordion style that can fit into armrests and allows it to pull up and block the space between you and the passengers as you're eating, so that any potential, airborne particles will be caught. Both would be made of wipeable materials, so at the end of, the day, the flights would, when they go through their deep clean, they can all be wiped down and given that disinfectant spray. Again, the primary user group for this would be 50 plus travelers, and then the secondary would also be flight attendants because it helps to restrict some of that the air transmission from like COVID particles, and yeah. And that brings us on to concept 3, and Vincent got this one.
So with concept 3, it's the middle seat concept. Our main nursing interventions is reducing the spread of virus by sectioning the air between adjacent seats. with the glass shield above the head level from the armrests. We're reducing the anxiety and the stress of catching the virus from the surrounding by not kind of sharing the air with neighbors when the masks are taken off during eating. And we're enhancing passenger travel experience with higher safety protection from the airlines. For the educational plan, we are going to teach the passengers that shield up when taking the mask off, having the shield up when feeling the need to be protected and precautions. We're going to have additional announcements from the captain and flight attendants during flights about using this new concept, and additional explanation will be in the safety booklets.
So when designing this concept, the 3 pain points we were really focusing on were people wanted to eat and drink during the flight, but then other passengers were concerned with the length of time masks were off, and then just like adhering to CDC guidelines, because there's not that much space on a plane, and so everybody is pretty close together. And then just the uncertainty of like how many people have been vaccinated around you, alleviating those stressors. So what exactly this is it's like a plexiglass divider and a lunchbox combo. It sits in the center seat normally, but it can be moved to any seat really. If used, it would cost extra since the airline is losing a seat, but it allows food to be loaded before anyone is on the plane by an attendant, which then reduces unnecessary human interactions. The food would go inside the lunch boxes that are on either side of the plexiglass divider. And then the boxes can be taken out and used as like a little lap table. And then when finished, the trash would just stay in the box and then is clipped back into the main body of the plexiglass area. And then if ever it needs removed, an attendant could easily take it out, and then it becomes essentially a flat pack. Once the plexiglass divider is taken off, the boxes are like made of a silicone and plastic materials, and they can be like squished a little bit, flattened, and they can be easily stored somewhere in the plane. Our main user is 50 plus travelers, and then our secondary user are flight attendants again, because they're the ones that have to load it, clean it, and all of those things.
Yep. And then so for further validation, we're going to be conducting surveys. We're going to be sending out our surveys to, people who we previously interviewed. We're going to target also Facebook groups with people that are older, that travel, and then parents of friends, as well as any additional contacts that we might be able to find through those that we interviewed. The survey will be done through Google Forms, and we will be basically asking questions that pertain to the concepts, showing them, and getting feedback, really quick feedback on what people think of the concepts, and getting some further validation. So thank you. And if you have any questions, we'll be glad to answer them.
Nice presentation. Eileen or Janine, do you have any questions that you have? I've got some comments on each concept, so I don't know who wants to go first.
I can go first. First of all, great
Okay.
job. It was very easy to follow, and not being a designer, I was able to look at your drawings and get an idea of what you're proposing. So I thought that was really good. The question I had as you were talking about your first concept, and you were talking, I think it was the screen. Maybe that's not. Forget
You
that.
go back to
Just answered my own question. I was talking about the retracting, about the retraction. Or I know it's not necessarily that, but the seats in the planes lean back.
Yeah.
So did you think about that, and what type of, if there needed to be any additional thought process to your concept for the individual who tends to lean back?
Yeah, we thought about that. That one that goes on the back of the seat is retracting, and it's made of a more flexible material, so it'd probably be a retractable vinyl. So it can bend as the person leans back, and also it'd be attached by a hook that could attach to the ceiling of the cabin. So that is pretty flexible as far as that goes. As far as leaning back with the bottom concept, the idea is that it goes just a little bit further back than the back of the seat, so that there's only a few degrees of adjustment on a seat as it is nowadays. So ideally, that little bit of overlap there would take care of any any adjustment that the person is having in their seat back. But yeah, that is a consideration that we should continue to think about.
Yeah, along those lines, then, what about your other concepts where you have something in between the seats? So what happens if passenger A decides to lean back, or the guy on the aisle leans back and the guy on the window does not? Does that have you? I mean, I'm sure you thought about that as well. But those were things that were coming into my mind as you were thinking about, or as I was listening to your presentation, of all of the different ways people travel in planes, as far as leaning back, leaning up, leaning over.
Yeah, and I think that is something that we can definitely address with the middle seat concept, and like we said with the last one, this middle seat concept, I think the idea is that it'd be pretty form-fitting, as far as because that middle seat wouldn't necessarily be moving. It wouldn't cause a lot of issue as far as like creating any gaps. But we can definitely try to make it more form-fitting with what we're seeing in planes, as far as keeping them so there are as few air gaps as possible when people are moving stuff around.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
Well, those were my questions as you were describing your concepts and your inventions. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, guys. It's Professor Gooden. Just nice job overall on your presentation. My question for you is, how does this, the one that we were talking about, the built-in shielding, how does that interfere with airflow in a cabin? If you're going to make it pretty tight, how would that affect the flow of air in general? Will it be impeded? Will you still be able to circulate the air and filter the air?
We thought about that a lot, and after looking at a lot of diagrams for the airflow in an aircraft, we found that it works on a row-to-row basis, and the air circulate. We made a lot of considerations, and as long as we found that the partitions don't extend into the rows, it is not going to pose a significant obstacle to the air. And because the air moves along rows, any partitions that are front to back, that stop air from front to back, won't really interfere with the airflow in the seats. So there were considerations made for that, and I think that while there is a little bit of compromise as far as airflow, obviously because we're trying to block some, I think the overall effectiveness of the air in the cabin is still going to be quite high in terms of like getting that air out and filtered.
They also,
Sorry.
a little. Oh, sorry. There are also a little details about this design, that the shield's not going to go all the way up to the ceiling, so there will be like a gap in between. And as Jerry explained about airflow, is kind of like on the road to the road, not like directly vertically. So this feature wouldn't be disrupting the airflow in the airplane so much.
Well, if you're not going to have shielding up to the ceiling in between the rows, will that still provide each passenger with sufficient shielding? Or are we still going to be, it sounds like that they're still maybe at risk for spread of COVID with the way that the design currently is. So
yeah, that's
sorry, I can go first, and because I kind of want to respond to Dr. Gooden about this. So our thinking was that the spread of virus is like the respiratory virus. So it's come out from very much kind of like the head level. So we were thinking about if the spreading, it will be like, I mean, it's the air, but most likely gonna be like communicable level. So we're thinking about additional protection above the head could help. But yes, we're taking your comment as a consideration to see how far the shields can go and if this can be effective. Hopefully, after the survey, we will have some idea about this.
Okay.
Yeah,
Definitely
they're I was at the Montgomery Inn Boathouse on their top level, and they have an outdoor patio. And when it's cold out, they have these screens that come down and they interlock. But they're so you can sit outside, but you know there's still there's an overlap between them. So maybe there's a solution out there in that type of thing. So
Yeah.
maybe all can go to Montgomery Inn and get some ribs and check it out. Real quick, since we just ran out of time, concept one and the concept 1 and 3, basically, I'd like to see before, during, and after the flight attendants interaction with these systems. So you're proposing that they're putting this stuff in before you get there, and then you come in and sit down, and then when you're done, you take them out. If you have images of that, somebody that's never seen this is going to get it right away. They're going to understand exactly what's going on. So 1 and 3, I think it would be really beneficial if you could make that kind of storyboard timeline of how this works. Concept 2, I agree with what everybody was saying. I would have liked to have seen how you're proposing the backrest shield to attach to the ceiling, and who's going to do that? Is that going to be an automatic thing? Are that somebody has to turn around and pull it up? Does everybody in the row have to do it? You know, I think there's some, I guess for lack of a better word, logistics from the passengers to flight attendants perspective on how that's all going to be deployed. The one side to side, I think, looks pretty straightforward. You just basically take them and pull them up. That's what I've got. I think you guys did an excellent job. I just think if you're gonna, like, as we go into our next phase, if you could add just a little bit more of how this actually works before, during, and after, then it's gonna be crystal clear to anybody viewing it.
Yep. And we'll definitely work up some of those storyboard concepts to like show in progress action. So yeah, thanks for that feedback.
Excellent. Good work.
Thank you so much.
Okay, so next up is COVID deaths, I believe.
All right, I'll go ahead and share my screen. Okay. And can you guys see this okay?
A-okay.
All right.
All right, I'm gonna start us off. Our team is COVID deaths. My group members are Ellie, Megan, Kat, and myself. And our concepts were developed for transporting the decedent. We're gonna go over the process overview, storyboard, our 3 directions for our concept, and the validation plan. Our pain points that played a significant role for our concepts were safety, ergonomics, and minimizing personnel necessary to operate the product. And with that, I'll pass it on to Ellie.
Thanks, Precious. So yeah, like Precious said, we're going to be going over our process for how we got to where we are today. And so we started off in this stage really going in and doing a deep dive task analysis, zooming into the decedent moving and transportation process specifically. And so taking that, we did a lot of brainstorming and sketch ideation and created some physical functional prototypes from that. And finally, that led us to where we are today. So going back to the storyboarding that we did, we really just, as you can see, did a deep dive analysis of the task of performing aftercare on the decedent. So making sure they're clothed, their wounds are bandaged, they're bathed. And another really important part of this storyboard, as you'll see, is all these squares that are highlighted in yellow are points during this process where the body is being either turned for to have their back washed or anything like that, or physically moved from their bed when they'll be transferred to the funeral home or a morgue or anywhere where they might be. So after we did this whole process and took another look at our problem, we had some key pain points and insights that led us to the concepts we're going to go into with you. So to describe those pain points, one of them is ergonomic difficulties just in general. This is a really having to move, dead weight where you can't have any assistance is a lot of hard work. And one of our interviewees pointed out an inflatable device that makes turning a lot easier. So we were inspired by that. Another pain point is having to use a baggy sheet to move the patient. We found that sheets are used really often because they're just so accessible. And the problem is they're kind of one size fits all. So there's having to kind of bunch up the sides and make a makeshift handle to move a patient isn't really ideal. And it's not custom. So we also looked at that. And then the last issue, which is really a huge one, is understaffing. And obviously this is a very kind of high level issue that we couldn't directly address, but in trying to look at some of the symptoms of this issue, it is just really a lot of pressure on nurses when you have to have 2 to 3 people to turn a patient. And that's just really tough when there's already a lot of patients and everyone is spread super thin. Having to, more nurses, it's just hard. So anything that we could do to help have less people needed for that process is a win. So we also looked at that for our last concept. So getting into these, Kat and Megan are going to talk about a little more in depth about how these concepts work and the clinical intervention side of them.
All right, so moving into the first concept, Ellie kind of touched on how having an inflatable mattress can really help with moving these decedents. So that's what this first concept is. So it would have 2 sections in it that could be inflated, which would then give the ability to have a wedge. So this could help turn the patient at a tilt. And then we also added the straps on each side to secure them so that when they are moving them from a stretcher to the bed, the patient is fully secured.
So the nursing interventions that we came up with, and these are going to be similar for all of our concepts because our concepts are all somewhat similar. So the first one is teaching safe use. So we have found that most people, when they receive a product, you pretty much throw out the instruction manual immediately or lose them. So what we would want to do is we would want to have a sewn in or stenciled in QR code that in one of the corners that then links out to a video demonstration. We would also, just because a lot of hospitals have very poor internet connectivity, we would also just want step-by-step directions sewn in as well, with just very basic diagrams. And then also for this inflatable mattress, we would also like to have an 800 number to call for repairs in case of an air leak, because then we can provide a patching service. And then finally, we would have a weight limit of 350 to 400 pounds. And then we also took a look at how to make sure that we could properly clean the product. And so for this product, we said that you have to sanitize it using a 10 to 100 bleach solution. And that can either be a spray or those Sani cloths that are available in many hospitals. And then we recommend using gloves while disinfecting.
So moving on to the second concept that we looked at, this is dealing with that baggy sheet pain point. So having a slip sheet that is adjustable to each patient. So basically how this works is you have your normal slip sheet that can help take away some of the friction when you're moving the patient, and you have these handles on the side that can be scrunched up to give a change the width of the sheet so that if you need to get underneath the patient, you are able to, and you're not dealing with a ton of excess fabric.
So once again, in order to teach safe use, we wanted the QR code with the video demonstration and the directions stenciled. And then this one would also have a weight limit of 350 to 400 pounds. The cleaning of this product varies a little bit. Instead of having it be wiped down, it would be like a nylon fabric. So it would be able to just be put in the linen basket, and it would be machine washable on a regular cycle. So it could be done with all the other linens in the facility.
And then our last concept, this was addressing understaffing, and this would really help nurses be able to move patients with as little help as possible. So this is sort of an apron design that can strap onto the patient, and using the straps that are attached, you can adjust the tension. So you can possibly tie these straps onto the bedside rails. So you can actually suspend the patient at a tilt if you need to get underneath them or turn them for whatever reason.
And so these are the same interventions as the last one. Again, we would have the QR code and video demonstration and directions sewn in, with the weight limit being 350 to 400 pounds. And then this product would also be machine washable and could be washed with the rest of the linens.
So we're going to validate the functionality of our product by reconnecting with the nurses that we met before, and then testing the product during nursing open lab hours. And that concludes our product or our presentation.
Yeah.
Any questions?
Thanks. Could you show concept 1 again?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, do you know at what angle you're going to need to lift the body? And what is the purpose of lifting the body?
Do you mean for having the angle to it with sort of that wedge design?
Yeah.
So that the reason that we had this is so that you can sort of suspend them at an angle like the other concept, so that it's easier for nurses to maneuver underneath them. They can kind of use that air mattress to aid in getting underneath the body when they're cleaning it in the aftercare process.
So that you don't have to do as much lifting.
So at what point do you not have to do as much lifting? So if you've got an angle and you're going up, and say you do a 10-degree angle, don't you still have just as much weight on that angled surface as you did when it was flat? Or at what point when you're rotating up do you get to a point where you start to relieve pressure off of the main back and you can tilt the patient more easily, or the deceased more easily? And the other question I had on it is, once you get access, is that thing still inflated, or are there sections that deflate so you can do what you need to do and still hold the patient in place?
I think the idea with the two sections, I don't know if you can see it or if it's clear, but you can inflate only one section of it. So it could be just a full sort of air mattress, as you can see up at the top, or it could be a wedge design. So you could possibly have it underneath the patient and then inflate it to sort of lift them up. And then when you're transporting them to a stretcher, say, that air mattress really kind of gives a added cushion and really help with pulling that dead weight.
I think what you have to do is really think hard about why do you need to get access to the deceased there, and what are you going to do? What tasks need to be performed, and then is this wedge what is needed? Or is there a modification to this wedge that'll help you do what needs to be done? That's just a little unclear to me. Concept 2. Yeah, I thought this was pretty self-explanatory. Thought this was good. Concept 3. Again, I have a question about access. So when you wrap this around the body and you turn them, do you have clear access to the areas that you need to have clear access to?
Yeah,
And
so
what do you do?
yeah, so this one, their back would be totally uncovered, and in this design that we have drawn, the straps aren't the straps aren't communicated as being as adjustable as we're thinking that we will have them be in our next iteration. But so this front panel, it's, you know, as you can see, it's kind of taking inspiration from the shape from like when you get an x-ray at the dentist office and they like lay that lead thing over your shoulders. So this is like the front is covered, and then in our future, you know, iterations of this design, we would make the straps a little bit more like adjustable, so you can kind of shimmy that around, but the back would be open. Yes.
Okay, so think about, again, like I said, to travel before, during, after.
Mhm.
And if you could create a small timeline or storyboard of, this is what the nurses have to do. They have to get these straps underneath first. Second, they put the top over it. Third, they lace it up. Fourth, they roll the body. Fifth, they get access. So then somebody can see that sequence right away, and they don't have to imagine what's going on with it.
Mhm.
Oh, is that not? I thought that was in the instructions for use. You mean like just breaking that down a little bit more?
Yeah, it is an instruction for use, but it's also an instruction on really the concept, on how the concept would work. And in fact, many times you can use those same illustrations for your user manuals or your how-to manuals or your training. But it's so that a viewer who's going to be reviewing your concept can understand it in context. So this is how it works. This is how you put it on the person. And then once the person's in position, they're in position for a reason to do these things, you know? So then you can get feedback on, oh yeah, that would relieve one more person could be doing other things, or two more people possibly, whatever. And that's where we find that out during validation.
Mhm. Yeah.
Janine or Eileen?
I'll make a few comments. First of all, good job, guys. So,
Yeah.
I think that your interventions are appropriate for the 3 devices. They all have pros and cons. Like Steve had mentioned, you want to be able to get access. You need access to the back of your patient. So, especially if you're cleaning them up to turn, because sometimes, you know, things happen. Or if you have a pad under there, like would they work with a pad? So if the patient does soil, but at this point, wait, they're going to have a body bag, right? So they're going to be in the body bag. Does this go over the body bag?
Well, we were looking at the aftercare as well. So we took it back a little bit further and said, okay, when we're actually doing the bed baths after somebody has passed away, and a lot of the times they eliminate after they pass away. So we are also including this cleanup procedure, which was where the like suspension and stuff came in, so that you're not like holding up the body and trying to wash their back and clean up any elimination and all that kind of stuff.
Okay. No, I think that is a great idea. And I would just make sure that that's clear of all the different scenarios that you could use this product. It could be used, you know, possibly like, you know, in the morgue on the table, or also, you know, in the hospital room, like, you know, you're going to be in isolation. So it's hard to find staff that you can get to come in and help. So you're right. You want something that could be used with one person. And the other thing is, as far as the sliding, you've got it here, just like on this particular one, about rolling more side to side. But with this material, be easy to slide, be pretty much friction free as it moves up the bed. Like, could, somebody, reposition the patient by themselves with this device? It's not like we're worried necessarily about getting them, scooted up too high in the bed, but we at least want them in the bed, right? In midline, so to make sure that whatever the material is that it's made out of, that it would slide easily along the sheets. But I like the option that it has where you can get to the back of the patient. So you have the straps.
Thank you.
Anybody else?
Yeah, I
There's a
think that
hand
it might
up.
also be worth considering hybridizing some of these concepts together, because if you have this wedge and you also have a sheet that is capable of actually moving the patient, it might be a combination of two of these concepts together. Like one of the sheets, like the loose sheet with the more customized handles on top of the wedge, might be useful because the wedge is providing an advantage of gravity, right? You're having a little bit more ease of moving the patient without additional nursing staff necessary. So if you were to put perhaps like concept 1 and concept 2 together, that might be sort of a combined concept that you can refine into one primary concept that addresses both of those concerns.
Christopher Went from NIOSH has a question.
Yes, as part of the prevention design program, we have investigated and promoted some devices that aid in patient lifting, namely the crane-like arms that are designed to help the patients move into position, and they're very effective, but there are some drawbacks. They're bulky, expensive to use, and not everybody's gonna have them.
Christopher, your audio is really breaking up.
I couldn't understand them.
If I stop
Okay,
on mute, that might help.
Is that better?
That's much better, thanks.
Okay, sorry about that. There are crane-like devices that are in hospitals now that are designed for patient moving that we've kind of promoted as prevention through design. But they do have drawbacks. They're bulky, they can be difficult to use, and they're very expensive. And so I like the idea of these being more, portable and they look like they're less expensive. But it might be useful to look at some of those devices that are already in use and kind of at least address some of their drawbacks, or maybe see if they could be integrated in some of these concepts that you're coming up with.
Are you referring to maybe the Hoyer lift, or are you talking about those devices, or is there?
Yes.
Because that only works really if somebody's alive. I mean, decedent is dead weight, so it would be harder to get that underneath them.
Yeah, I know there's several different designs for it, but yeah.
I was gonna say, I did hear about one hospital that did have a lift from the ceiling, but that was a very, very nice hospital and it was very expensive. And that's where it's okay, well, most don't have access to those. So what's a cheaper alternative we can try?
Is there a way, because the deceased body is different than a live patient, is there a way to make it more practical, because you don't have to worry about certain aspects of moving the patient if they're already deceased? So it might be wise to at least incorporate that into the presentation, or because I know that I was thinking about that when you guys are starting out.
Yeah, you definitely touched on a point that we've been talking about too, how this is, it's using things that are very accessible, which is the sheet, versus these high-end things that are, high tech, and that middle spot is definitely somewhere that we want to get. So I like your suggestion to really communicate that.
But yeah, I like your concepts. They're very, intriguing. Look forward to seeing the future.
Awesome.
Okay, excellent. Good job. For the sake of time, we're going to have to move to the next group, nurse protection. So whenever you're ready.
Are you going to share, Jordan?
Sorry, sorry, my bad. Yes, I'm going to share. Give me one sec. Okay, can everyone see this in full screen? I'm going to assume yes. Okay, so we are nursing protection. Of course, this is our concept development presentation from all the concepts we've been coming up with over the past couple weeks. So we're basically just going to go through our key concepts, but before that, we'll kind of do like a little brief recap. Luke created this nice data matrix on how to rate some of our concepts, and we'll also go through some of our early concepts that we haven't really moved forward with, but there might be some like gold nuggets in there. So
I'm sorry, Jordan. I'm sorry,
yeah.
I can't see the screen.
Oh, you can't see this?
I can see it.
I can see it.
Maybe it's still loading or something on your end.
It's good here.
Okay. Well, I'll just keep going then. All right, so cool. So first, just as a recap, so off of our research presentation, both secondary and primary, we kind of came up with some potential directions that consisted of like UI education systems, telehealth services, debriefing reflection tools, either digital and or physical, prioritization tools, and this is kind of like where this was a lifting off point for some of our concept development. But first, Luke is going to go over some of the data matrix things that he had cooked up. So go ahead.
Yeah. So this is our design matrix, data matrix. We took some of the design guidelines and we kind of matched them up with each of our concepts. And we kind of gave them a rating out of a scale of 1 to 10. And then we totaled up the numbers. And from the analysis, the three concepts that we saw that had the strongest potential was a sort of nurse spa and like wellness or therapy center, a guided reflection workbook / like online tool, and then a nurse social support network or tool. These were the ones that scored the highest. You can go to the next one. The other ones were kind of didn't stack up nearly as close to those ones, but
yeah, and I'll kind of go over those first too. So like some of our early concepts, we had a like care package type concept, and the whole idea behind that was it could either be used by nurses themselves or it could be used by sort of like other people who aren't nurses as a way to kind of gift towards other like actual nurses as like a form of appreciation. So it's kind of like one of those subscription based package things. So they could be included like words of affirmation, like customizable like therapeutic products. So they could like choose like what they want specifically, information pamphlets about mindfulness and reflection, things like that. Or if it was somehow tied to ANA, if there was like curated like information brochures or like books or something surrounded around like how to treat mental health, like focus on mental health and things like that. So that was one concept, early concept. Another one was a big picture journey map surrounded around the pandemic itself. So like all of our concepts are pretty like reactionary. So this one was a little different. It's a little more like preventative / like preparative, and it was supposed to be like a education type platform for nurses to like better prepare themselves for a pandemic. And it was like a really like nice, it would have been like a nice, like comprehensive like journey map showing like the timeline of a pandemic and like educational tips and things like that for nurses. That was another concept. We also had some other ones that were kind of more like system based that would be like put in place at hospitals, like a mentorship program. From what we saw from our interviews, like older, or like more experienced nurses, I should say, didn't have as much stress as the younger ones. So if there was like a program put in place at hospitals where more experienced nurses are buddied up with younger, more inexperienced nurses to kind of help navigate first starting out as a nurse. And it's kind of like preventative to make sure like those younger nurses aren't getting too stressed out, making sure they always have someone that they can talk to or refer to. So that was another concept, as well as like an expressive signage type thing, where whether it was like color coded like badges or scrubs or whatever, some sort of visual indicator that lets like floor managers know like how that nurse is feeling that day type thing. And it's kind of like, again, it's kind of related to like the mentorship thing where it's like it's a lot of like system based, making sure everyone's on the same page. And if like that specific nurse was feeling a certain way, maybe they could have the priority shifted. But anyway, so those are some of our early concepts. One of our stronger ones was this nursing spa and therapy center, which Luke can kind of talk about a little more.
Yeah. So can you actually go forward to the storyboard real quick? And okay, so this is a small little storyboard. It's kind of based off one of our interview subjects. Oh, okay. Who was really adamant about, sometimes she would say that she really dreaded going into work the next morning. So we were kind of thinking, like, how can we get nurses either more excited about going to work or kind of take away some of those feelings of anxiety? And so this storyboard kind of walks through a woman who, really loves what she does. She loves making a difference, but sometimes, things don't go right and she maybe loses a patient, and she gets she cries about it at home and doesn't have many people to talk to about it. And so their hospital implements this, it's called a spa and wellness center. And she can go in and, get most of the things you can get done in a spa, like massages or like jacuzzis. But then there's also this whole other aspect of it where, you can sign up for individual therapy or group therapy or guided, yoga and meditation and mindfulness training. And it might not just be like just nurses, but maybe just hospital facility or faculty in general, just because I'm sure nurses aren't the only ones that are stressed in the hospital setting. But it just seems like a very, having this whole separate building next to the hospital where they can go and, it kind of takes away all the stresses of the job. And if you want to go back one slide, Jordan.
Yeah.
The two things we talked about were because one of our design criteria or guidelines was we don't want them to stay longer at their work. So we had talked about doing either an on-site one that might, get them more excited to coming to work, or an off-site or remote area that would kind of act like a safe haven away from work. And it would be at, some of these spa centers that are like this that are already out there are pretty expensive. But if this is run through the hospital, it could have, either like a severe like pay cut or not like a pay cut, but a severe discount for the nurses, or offer other benefits for people that might not be able to afford it.
Yeah, I think another thing too, like it doesn't necessarily have to just be this like therapy or like this like spa. Like it could also be like this opportunity to have this sort of building that creates like this community of people who are all trying to be like like get better like wellness. And like so I like we also imagine that there could be like support groups or like events and things like that. Like all the stuff that happens in the hospital, like volunteer chaplains, creative writing, therapy sessions, just therapists coming in general, like this could all take place at these wellness centers, whether that's
Hey,
on slash.
You're running long. You got about a minute before you're halfway.
Okay.
You're at 10 minutes right now.
Okay. Well, I guess we'll just go on.
All right,
But
let's shoot through.
yeah, sure. Oh, well, I guess we should talk about the intervention too, if Katrina or Shannon want to take over here.
Yeah, I'll do the interventions for the spa. So
Oh,
as
I'm sorry.
Luke and Jordan said, so the spa or like a wellness center would be a mean to provide a safe haven or just a place for the nurses to have somewhere where they can get just they can get relaxed and just not have to deal with the stress of the job. So some of the interventions that we, after looking at some research, we found that our aromatherapy, acupuncture, reflexology, therapeutic massages, those are all relaxation methods that have been proven through evidence-based research to reduce stress. And then also like a meditation room where they could have group meditation or individual meditation, guided meditation, and then also just other things that you will find at the spa, like a steam room, a sauna, even if uh, they could exercise with the massage chair, just any other tools that this space could have to induce relaxation and I guess peacefulness for these nurses after their shift, where they wouldn't have they're not necessarily in the hospital anymore, but they don't have to go out of their way to be able to find a place to decompress and relax at the end of their shift.
Cool. And then like the next two concepts are kind of inherently related, so we'll kind of do both of them at the same time, I guess, save time. But so both of these next concepts are kind of like prompted reflection tools, whether that's like a physical workbook or some sort of digital platform. But this one specifically is a little more like physical based, obviously, because it's like an actual like physical workbook. But the idea is to help like facilitate reflection and mindfulness, and this would be like it have to be like a self-driven sort of voluntary type thing. And the idea again stems from like nurses. One of their biggest coping strategies after a shift is to go home and talk about it with their spouse. So this is something that could be used like solitary or with that spouse as sort of like a way to debrief after a shift at the hospital. And some of like the content that could be inside it would be like therapeutic writing prompts, such as like free writing or like writing letters to oneself or like to other people, even if they're not actually sent. Those were all like forms of writing therapy. But above all else, it kind of creates this like tangible artifact that they can always refer to as part of their reflection process, and it kind of creates this like meaningful sort of object for them. And so like the use cases would be like they could either use it in solitary before and after a shift, or they could use it in sort of like a group setting, whether that's with like a one confidant, like their spouse or like whoever they live with or something. Or it could be used like in a like group sort of like support setting too. And then some of the interventions I think Katrina came up with that she can go over real quick.
Well, first I have the evidence-based research that's listed from a study that was done in 2020 on peer-to-peer and individual support. And then the prompts that we would have inside the journal for fostering reflection could be today was hard because, I needed a break because, or what am I grateful for today? These are things that can help spur the creative process. This is self-driven. It's a voluntary activity. It's best used before or after a shift or even during a shift if time would permit.
Yeah, totally. And that kind of goes into the digital version, which kind of adds like a lot more versatility and like Just a lot more like features and way to connect with others. But some of the features that would included, other than like the prompted guidelines that were found in the physical version, but there could be like private messaging between nurses. It could be a hub for like updates on local events and support groups. There could be educational materials such as like practices surrounding around reflection, mindfulness, and therapy and things like that. Again, yeah, it would have like prompted reflection guides and activities, but above all else, I think it has like a really strong like opportunity for telesupport services. So we kind of put together like just quick like faux wireframe. It'd be like a pretty easy like like 3-4 step process where this platform is specifically used for nurses. So when they log in, they'd have like credentials of like where they work, like how much experience they have as a nurse. And when they first log in, one of the like features allows to ask like, how was your day today? Or like, how did your shift go? And they type in some key words such as like, I'm feeling pretty physically exhausted today. I lost a patient today. I didn't get much sleep last night. And there's other nurses out there who are probably experiencing those same things. So it would kind of match you based off that. And then after that, you can kind of like reach out, talk to those nurses. It really creates this kind of like micro community of like nurses helping nurses type thing. So they can like call each other, message, like FaceTime, I guess, or just telehealth support system. And here we kind of have a scenario of a nurse, probably a younger nurse who probably only has like a year experience, lives alone. And so she's working her 12-hour shift. She may have like lost a patient or something traumatic happened while at work, and she gets home and there's no one that she can talk to really. So she can just hop on this tool, kind of like express her feelings, and maybe she can get matched with someone who also had that same experience that day or that week or just anybody. Like I said, it'd be like a platform to really like connect nurses on like a more deeper level that you can't really find on like online forums or like blog sites and stuff like that. So it could be really cool if we, do it correctly, but that's kind of that. We also have some interventions there too.
Again, you would have the prompts to promote writing and interaction. And then based on the interaction with the prompts, based on the responses, that's how you would be paired with another nurse that could be having the same similar struggle or the same types of day. And then there could be lists of events to promote connection and mental health. Do you want to finish it up, Shana?
Sure. And as Jordan said, so it would provide interprofessional community, and so it creates a sense of belonging, so especially for nurses that don't necessarily have family members or friends that they may be able to talk with at the end of their shift. And then also there's an opportunity, of course, for mentorship, especially between experienced or seasoned nurses and new graduates that might need a little bit extra help navigating their day-to-day struggles during their shift.
Yeah, and then just some of the next steps. We started putting together a survey to kind of get some feedback that reaches like more broad people. We'll also probably reach out to our nurses that we interviewed within the next few days to get more like deep feedback. And we'll just keep ideating on these concepts. We'll probably really decide on one here in the next couple days, but yeah, we'll just keep going forward. And if there's any questions, feel free to ask or need anything cleared up if we missed anything.
Having trouble with the microphone. Nice presentation.
Thanks.
Nice. I was hitting it. It was unmuting and then muting again. So nice presentation. It's always interesting, and it's certainly something that is necessary, not just in nursing, but all the professions right now, is as being able to take care of oneself. and finding the place to do that. I think the difficulty, if that's the word, that your group experiences in doing that is the work world in which a nurse belongs to, which is a 7 a.m. start and a 7:15, 7:30 p.m. stop, which is not guaranteed. The nurse can and has worked longer than the shift to get tasks done that they need to in order to be finished with their work day. So, you know, having a facility like the spa center, first of all, that would be really awesome as far as costs and being able to put something like that into play. But again, the hours of operation would need to be available so that your shift can work before and after. And that sometimes it tends to be a place where you might run into some difficulties, just because in order for someone to do an hour's worth of workout prior to going to they have to actually like be sitting ready to go at 7 o'clock.
Mhm.
So in order to do that, something would need to be open like at, I don't know, 4:35 a.m. in order for someone to get there to do some kind of workout or do some kind of work prior to, and then being able to then get ready to go to work afterwards. So some of that logistical things might cause some issues within that. Love the reflection piece. I'm a big person on reflection. The students that I work with know that. And I think that's very, very helpful in doing that. You mentioned mentorship programs and things like that. And a lot of that is already kind of employed in nurse residency programs and things as they work on the units. But could there be something else for them to participate in? Absolutely. Absolutely, there could be. And getting people together to kind of share, but I think they also need to have somebody in there that can help them navigate. So and this just comes from my experience of working in the residency programs. You need a skilled facilitator in there so that you get the work done that needs to happen. Otherwise, it becomes a complaining session. And so the help that you want doesn't occur then because they're not facilitated. So those are just my comments on it. Nice job though. And then one thing you might think about doing as you're trying to decide which way to go is that some of the facilities in town, and I don't know if you're aware of, like the Mercy Health System they have a healthplex. So like Fairfield has one, Anderson has one. I don't think West or Claremont has one, but they have a facility that's either adjacent to or attached to the facility itself, where there's a swimming pool and this kind of stuff is there, and to see how many of their employed nurses like actually partake in that, because there's a discount that's to belong and things like that. So
Yeah.
they have one and Tri-Health has one. Just a thought.
Cool.
Janine, you want to follow up? We were running really over on this one, so if we could make it quick.
I'll keep it super short. Good job overall with your presentation, with your interventions. I thought the interventions aligned with each of the concepts. I don't know realistically if with budgets and how tight budgets are with hospitals, if the spa would be a realistic option for many healthcare facilities, considering all the additional costs that they've had that they've encountered with COVID. That definitely could be a barrier for the spa. I think the spa would be, that would be nice. But I don't know what the use would be, because I know a lot of times at the end of my shift, when I work a 12-hour shift, I want to leave and I don't want to look back until I have to come back. I want to get out of there as fast as I possibly can and go home and take a shower. That's me though. After 12, 13, 14 hours, I'm done. So
Yeah.
I don't know if I would personally want to do that after my shift. I might want to, maybe on my day off. We'll see.
I think that's what the general idea was, that it should be used on a day off, but I mean, there are still a lot of other complications with it. So
Right. Interesting concept, though. I would take a look at the Mercy HealthPlex system, like Dr. Wardman mentioned, and see if that, if what you're offering or what proposing to offer would be something similar to what's already exist and what the use is, to see if it would be worthwhile cost for the facility. I think that your other ideas are great. I think that those would certainly work reasonably well within a hospital budget, as tight as hospital budgets are. I think that's certainly something that could work within a lot of different facilities, and nurses could use, regardless of their healthcare setting, as long as they have, the resources they need, they can implement those. But good job.
Cool. Thank you.
Okay, moving right along, we have outdoor entertainment.
Hello.
Hello.
Just trying to share my screen. Can everybody see this?
Here we go.
Yep. Okay, so we're outdoor entertainment and concept development. Morgan, Kennedy, Beth, and Sarah. This is just like a background information, but we started looking at parks and playgrounds and post-pandemic and what those look like. So we focused on recess time and looking into safer options for kids playing on the playground at recess. And our pain points. So this is commonly discussed among parents, teachers, and kids. We narrowed it down to 4. We originally had 5, and then we kind of combined them into what are the major important ones that we wanted to focus out when concepting. So cleanliness and sanitation, looking at how people are sanitizing the playground equipment, how kids are keeping clean while they're playing on the equipment versus after and before. Schools not having a proper routine, so looking into what the routine is when they go outside to play on the equipment, teachers cleaning the equipment during recess, after recess, before, what materials are they using, injuries during recess time, so the structure of the equipment, focusing on how kids get injured on what equipment most and what equipment is the safest for them, and then age gaps, so based on the school that they're in, whether older kids and younger kids are playing together or it's both young kids and then just both older kids. So when we initially started sketching, we just sat down and we decided that we would sketch 5 main pieces of equipment that would be singular by themselves that could be placed anywhere, and then 2 main pieces of equipment, one targeted towards younger kids and then one targeted towards older kids. And so we developed around 5 to 6 concepts for each, looking at how we could seat them differently, space them differently, looking at distance regulated equipment that would make it so that kids have to be 6 feet apart to make the piece work. Like a teeter-totter, you have to be certain distance apart. But then also looking at how the equipment functions to prevent kids from misusing the equipment that could lead them to getting injured, and looking at points of touch where the kids would be touching the equipment. We had also looked at how the equipment was formed and the form and shape of the equipment that would make it easier for cleaning. So if someone were to spray water on the equipment, would it flow around it? Or if there's holes in the equipment or tight spaces where water could sit, and looking at just surfaces that teachers could easily get to with whatever cleaning supplies that they'd be using. And then looking at our mural board, we would just post everything that we had done and sketches and ideation that we were doing for each piece. And then we would start to mark which concept we were leaning towards the most based on our pain points.
Okay, so like Sarah said, for each concept, we did 2 pieces of large equipment, which at the top is shown for this concept, the equipment for the smaller children, and then the one to the right below it is for the larger kids, and older kids. So the equipment that we chose for smaller are there's a merry-go-round, rocking horse, swings, teeter-totter, and then these cars on a track. So these were all chosen because these are all things that keep kids a certain distance away from each other. For example, you can't really have 5 kids on a 2-person teeter-totter. So these were all arranged in the top right is the aerial view, which shows kind of an arena type setting. So this has all of the big equipment on the outside, and then some of the other equipment on the inside, and then on the edge along as well. And for this concept, we picked a static water box, which would just be able to have the teacher or custodian spray down the equipment with hot soapy water, which would get rid of the virus. And this would only be able to be touched by the teachers. So this was the first one, which one of the things we've kind of talked about back with our professors and within our group is just, even though this is an interesting concept, we don't know how feasible it would be for a school to dig out a ground like this, but we still wanted to keep it on our radar just as an option. And then here's concept 2 that has gone mostly with this open air concept, just because COVID is a airborne virus. We wanted to make sure that there's never going to be a time where kids are packed into a small area. So everything has ventilation holes, and even areas like the merry-go-round at the bottom left have distance areas for the kids to sit on, so that it's not crowded and we can keep kids apart. For this concept, we would have the cleaning solution come out on a automatic timer from these like circular objects within the pipes, and so that could clean the equipment easily, and it would not require anybody to do it by hand. And then the third concept is one similar to the second one, but just also in these areas of the circles. For example, if a teacher has a class of 1st graders, they would say you're only allowed to be on this circle because this is the smaller or the younger kids area, and then the other one would be the older kids area. Yes, but this one, we still have things spread out in a certain way that would make sense for COVID. Like the older kids probably won't be using a rocking horse, so that will be in the smaller kids area, and so on. And then the cleaning option we use for this is kind of a mobile cleaning device that would be able to use it to spray into the equipment, just so people could get around the corners. So that's all for the third concept. So from these, we haven't really decided exactly what we'll do yet. And within the concepts that we did for these 3, like a lot of the pieces can be mixed and matched between. So we will just continue to develop from there.
So for our nursing interventions, most of ours are going to center around education for the people who are using it, for our stakeholders, which we identified as the teachers, parents, and kids. This is like a mock handout of what will be given to teachers and janitorial staff about how to clean the playground, how frequently, what teachers need to do, and depending on which concept exactly we choose, I'll update the information, but the big emphasis was to focus on high traffic areas. So railings or any of those, if you've ever been to a playground where those tic-tac-toe games that kids can manipulate, basically anything kids are going to have their hands all over, trying to emphasize like focus on those sorts of areas.
So then another pain point we identified in our original interviews were that parents had a lot of anxiety surrounding what was going on at the playground and how it was being cleaned and all those sorts of things. So we just designed this handout that could be distributed to parents either. I know at my school in elementary school, we had folders that would go home and it could get slipped in there, or through email or something like that, so the parents would have access. And so basically it highlights that we're going to be using new materials on the high touch surfaces that are kid safe, so they aren't infused with any chemicals, but they also are antimicrobial. And then it's going to outline the cleaning procedures, like Morgan just talked about, how frequent, and then how it's being done. And then it's also going to talk about the social distancing and how that's built into the new playground equipment. And then just on the back will be a visual of what it will look like. So then for students, we wanted to target prep before they were even going out to the playground, so that we make sure we get as many germs or nasty things off their hands as we can. So we wanted to play a video on how to properly wash their hands prior to them even going out for recess. And then we also wanted to have hand washing stations / bathrooms, however the school already has it, with color changing soap, which Savannah had brought up last week in our nurses meeting. And we actually found one online that is relatively cheap and accessible. And it just, however long you scrub, it will change color into clear once you can rinse it off, and it will stick to the surfaces like nail beds or other areas where we tend to not clean as well.
And that's it.
Okay.
Thank
All
you.
right. Nice job. Nice job. So I got a couple of things. I think these concepts all and the interventions sound really good. I don't know from a conceptual standpoint how you're planning on getting stakeholders to rank the equipment, and when we go to the next step of validating this, how you're going to do it, because you've got so many things and you're not really showing that this one is good because of this reason. You're just showing equipment, and I would personally take and
Steve, I can't hear you.
I'm muted. Sorry, I thought I hit the unmute. Let's see. My biggest concern about what I'm seeing is that how are you going to get these things ranked? You've got different components that are in different configurations. It's difficult from what you have to understand why each piece of equipment is a good solution to your pain points that you have. So I think you're going to need to add some notes and things like that.
Earlier we discussed with Chris about how to insert images into the survey that we're currently working on. So just looking at what equipment would be like we can ask in our surveys. First, we're starting off by asking, we aimed it towards teachers, which they think would be best for distancing at recess. And so just like looking at what equipment would be best, they think would be most beneficial for spacing wise. So looking back at our original sketches, looking at how we can add, we talked in DESCOM about doing either like a side profile or bubbles that could show distance between the equipment, and then showing how far apart each section would be, so that the user taking the survey would be able to see how far apart theoretically it'd be by adding a person on.
Just make sure you're adding that. Also, like the water sprayer, like in this particular concept, the form language isn't the same as the other stuff, and I was wondering if there was a reason why. You're muted now.
No, it was just like I feel like after we determine what style of cleaning we'll do, like whether it's portable or like put into the equipment, then we'll focus on the form of how it would look to go along with whatever style equipment we choose. It was
Okay,
just based on what category.
the other thing is on all the concepts, I would flip flop your perspective concepts and your plan view, or either make 2 pages for concept 1. You don't have to put all concept 1 on one slide. You
Okay.
don't really understand what this. There's nothing to really tell the viewer what this this plan view is, and especially on the other ones, it seems to get smaller and smaller. So, and that's it. This one is super important because it puts the whole thing into context. The other thing is that put some kids on here so we can see like what's happening. It's really difficult to see, these are so small on that. So those are my comments.
I agree with what Steve had to say. Good job. I like how you've addressed your population, and I think your interventions are spot on. But it would be good to see, there you go, there's some people there. But just putting them on there so that way you can see how it works, and just so you have a better idea of what's going on. Like here we see playground equipment, but is there distance in between? Just to show like the depth, for this because it looks like, yes, like you're on the side of a hill, but is that on the side of a hill, or is that an actual like, kind of sunk in area of the playground, like maybe putting in perspective like where the school is, just so you can see that you're actually like at a different elevation. But anyway, I think it looks good. But just to kind of show how it works, and really just focusing on what are the differences between this concept and the other 2 concepts. And that way they'll have a better idea of deciphering why they would like one over another. That's all I have. Good job.
Yep. Anybody else?
I don't have anything to add. I think it was a very nice job, and I love the ideas.
Okay, cool. Let's move on. We'll catch up a little bit. So good job, team.
Thank you.
Thanks.
So up next is grade schools. And after that is bars and restaurants.
All right, can everyone see my screen?
Yes, I can.
Wonderful. Okay, yeah, so like you mentioned, Steve, we are the grade school group, and these are our concepts and interventions. Our group consists of Caitlin, Jordan, Abby, Kristen, and I am Claire. So just to give a little overview, our refined focus is designing tools for better independent learning for students with ADHD. We found that in the pandemic, students with ADHD specifically struggled a lot, as well as every student did, but specifically these remote learning platforms did not give students with ADHD the level of stimulus and engagement that they need to be successful in the classroom. So ADHD is one of the most common neurodevelopmental disorders, and up to 10% of school-age children have the criteria for this diagnosis. So it's definitely a worthwhile area to explore in terms of better design. There are a few types of ADHD. Inattentive ADHD is when a child just exhibits inattention across multiple domains and when they're doing different activities. There's also a hyperactivity type in which students are unable to control their activity level and impulse to the same extent as other students can. But most common is combined levels of these inattentive and hyperactive ADHD symptoms, and this is the most common form of ADHD, and our designs try to target this combined form of ADHD.
So just as a reminder, some of the pain points that we've kind of talked about when we did our interviews and everything that our interviewees kind of discussed are as follows. So with this independent remote learning, there are a lot of unique challenges that students with ADHD faced. Sitting in front of a computer all day, it's a lot harder to maintain attention. Even speaking from experience with someone who without ADHD, I find it a lot harder to stay engaged versus being in a classroom. And that was kind of escalated by kids with ADHD. So kind of here they are laid out as follows. Just the lack of engagement with remote learning platforms was a huge pain point that we found. Especially, and then also difficulty organizing multi-step virtual assignments. It's a lot more challenging to kind of chunk things together virtually versus when you're in the classroom. Keeping track of time was also another difficulty. And sitting still in front of a screen all day long became a challenge. And then lack of regular breaks to let out kind of just for socialization and the mental resets that are very important with ADHD.
And then here's just a brief overview of our design process. So this kind of just explains our chaotic journey to get to our final 3 concepts, but we branched out very far, and then we narrowed down to our specific focus, and then branched out again into 5 concepts, and then narrowed down again to our final 3. And through this, we did a lot of sketching, which you can see on the next slide. A lot of sketch ideation, and then also we use a lot of mind maps, both in the digital format and also physically with Post-it notes. And then when we were making our decisions for our final 3 concepts, we considered these design requirements. We wanted our designs to be accessible, particularly economically, to make sure all students have access. We want them to be highly engaging for ADHD students, very applicable, and be able to help these students in a variety of classes and situations, so not just for one curriculum. And then we also wanted to create autonomy for students with this design, so their parents would not have to be as involved in their online learning. And so then we go into our final concepts and interventions. And this first concept is a sensory at-home workstation. So in this design, we have 4 major components. We have a focus partition, a sensory stylus, accessories, and then a sensory seat cushion and a sensory foot fidget. And then I'll break all of these down in the next slides. So this focus partition, it would be like a very simple collapsible system that would be able to open up and fold out almost like a tent. And then it would be able to block distractions and help students focus. There are some on the market, but we wanted to improve the design by adding translucent walls that would allow more light into their space, and then also making them bigger and allowing more work area for them as well. And then for the sensory stylus accessories, we noticed that a lot of the computers that students use include a stylus, but we wanted to make them more engaging for students with ADHD. So we added a stylus stand that would be weighted and have sensory textures and some sort of fidget to it, and then also a grip that could be put on different styluses. So this would have like a soft touch feel to it, and then have a very satisfying weight. And then the sensory seat cushions, these would easily strap to any chair, and then have different sensory textures on them. So as the student sitting on it, if they're sitting in class, they can rub on the different textures and have a bit of a fidget to it as well. And then finally, the foot fidget. So a lot of students with ADHD tend to tap their foot a lot and have that hyperactive motion. So we wanted to include some sort of foot fidget. This would have like a squish type of motion to it, and then since these students would be at home and be allowed to be barefoot, we included some different like sensory textures that could be put on top of them. And we wanted to include some customizability with this because we learned that some students will be negatively affected by certain textures where others are more positively affected.
So the idea for this concept is to improve the students' focus through use of physical sensory engagement. We have hopes that this would improve their focus on their current task when working independently. And then we'd make sure that their environment is free of stimulating or distracting aspects. And then something we also felt was important is to understand what each student's strengths and needs are. That way we are able to target each student's needs individually. And then kind of we mentioned in class today that there are some students who are undiagnosed with ADHD. So like this could even be something that people who are struggling, who are undiagnosed could also try and use and see if there's an improvement. And then this could also be like a relaxation or stress reducing technique for students. For the parents and teachers, we would want them to monitor their progress and make sure that this station is a good fit for them, just because like Claire mentioned, there are different types of ADHD. So some students may benefit from this more than others. And then we would want to make sure that they are still given simple directions because of their short attention spans. And then also enforce a daily routine so that they are able to have a ritual and grasp their independent functioning better.
So our second and third concepts are digital user interface systems designs. These were designed to tackle the large pain point of creating more engagement because currently there is that lack of engagement with current remote learning platforms. So concept 2 more specifically focuses on the pain points of difficulty organizing multi-step virtual assignments and their struggles with keeping track of time. So this concept is an engaging interactive visual map of a student's assignments for the day. And the context of this design would be like a plugin within the Google Classroom environment. So currently within Google Classroom, they do have your task layout for your classwork for the day, but it would just be like a redesign of this page. So the information would be translated to a very visual interface that might look something like this. So a visual map of the assignments for the day will provide much more sensory engagement with audio effects built in as they move through their tasks. And then also we've been focusing a lot on creating dopamine hits through different interactions without being distracting. So for example, like there might be an animation as you like go into the task to motivate the student to really dive into that task. But then once you're in that specific task and once you're doing your work, it really kind of blocks out the rest of the distractions on your screen. And then that clear order of the task work is established in this map overview. So when you click on the task, you have your individual task description with your clean, simple instructions to jump into it. And then, like I mentioned, just having a really clear interface showing the assignment, and then also including an aspect for a timer component in which that timer can be hidden. But while the teacher is monitoring students' progress on assignments, they can choose to alert the student just to pay attention to their time to make sure that they're staying on task. So additional teacher controls of this concept would include an automatic map update every day with the teacher's assignments within Google Classroom. The teacher can see the progress along individual student maps, and the teacher can also choose to implement a point reward system for progress motivation. Oftentimes gamifying different aspects of a student's routine, if the student has ADHD, is helpful to give them more dopamine hits throughout the day. So creating that reward system would be an optional feature for the teacher.
So as far as interventions go, kind of this digital tool itself has a lot of just intervention pieces that are beneficial for students. Oh, wait, I am talking about yours, sorry.
As we were saying, the digital tool will aid students in better organization. Students who struggle with staying on task throughout the day, especially just staying at the desk, this can give them different intervals or reminders to complete the specific task. So if something takes an hour, they can have like kind of like a countdown every 15 minutes. It'll give them a reminder that they need to get things done. Which the teachers can set these predetermined times for tasks, for reading, homework assignments, quizzes. They're able to communicate with the student and follow their progress as they go through. They can chime in if needed. It's easy to use, easy to understand. It's engaging and fun for the students, and it kind of gives them a little bit of competition so they can feel like they're not just sitting there bored, sitting in class all day, but they're actually interacting and actively participating. Teachers are able to upload projects, assignments, etc. to this map, which will allow the student to be able to access everything in one area and not get distracted by other options, especially with being on the internet. This aids in organization for teachers, parents, and students. They can all access everything from one point. It's easy to follow, especially for parents, and it improves adherence to the learning plan as well for all.
All right, and I see that we're running a little low on time. I'll try to go through this last concept relatively quickly. This is an interactive virtual classroom redesign. And what this targets is specifically a lack of community and identity in a virtual setup. This platform would allow kind of like a bit of a gamification of the classroom during the school day in a digital setting, because students are able to create their own digital identity through their own avatars. And then these avatars would be navigating the digital classroom in real time. And when your avatar like approaches the teacher or other students, if the teacher enables you to interact with other students during the day, a digital video chat can be initiated, kind of as you see in this circular call out. There's the teacher and the student, and then an actual video chat call would be initiated. So this is like a larger blown out overview just of what the classroom might look like and what components it might include. So there would be a collapsible sidebar where a student can check to look at all the tasks that will be happening and all the lessons that will be happening that day, but you can collapse that if you need to. And then a bottom bar can include items like a point system for completing their assignments, their tasks, or like a more specific task list, a quick chat with teachers and other students, and their inventory backpack. So by clicking on different icons within this classroom, students can navigate to different workspaces and interactions. So this is more closely mimicking like a real life classroom experience at your at-home desk. So for example, like if you click on these independent desks here, that will lead you to your independent workspace. And if you click on like the rug in the classroom, that might lead you to a collaborative workspace within this digital ecosystem. And then again, additional teacher controls for this is the ability to lock and unlock interactions between students during the day. And a teacher has the ability to call all the avatars to one area within the room. So this is just like a further visualization of what a digital classroom might look like in times when it is unsafe to all meet together, like in the global pandemic that we are coming out of right now.
Okay, so now for the virtual classroom, some of the interventions, again, they're kind of sort of built in almost, where it really was student targeted. A lot of these activities, they can be chunked or they're broken up into different sections, which is very nice. Can have built-in breaks as the visual schedule kind of goes down through. You can create that token economy system so they can earn points for completing assignments. You can have directions for assignments can be read aloud. You can use color blocking for certain points. You could even say, and they can be given, like a new direction can be given once an activity is completed. You could even, because this isn't interactive, you could have students repeat back instructions for understanding. And you could and they would be alerted to those specific times of the day on what their schedule would be. For parents and teachers, really the interventions would, I think, pertain more to the educational piece on how to use the new classroom, and if it's being used at home, for parents specifically, how to use that within their home environment and good setup of it, so that students are able to access it.
And then here are our next steps. So since we decide that our final concepts are still very broad and very different from each other, so when we're doing our validation, we wanted to narrow down to one concept and validate that system. So we were leaning more towards our first concept, the sensory at-home workstation, because we felt that it better meet all of the needs of ADHD students. So for our validation, we are going to talk to students, parents, and teachers from their perspective of students with ADHD. And then we want to learn which products in the system would be most valuable, least valuable, and how they could be improved.
And that is our presentation. So let us know if you have further questions or feedback for us.
Good job, guys. I really liked all of your different concepts that you guys presented. I can see why you might go with the first concept over all three, but I think all three have potential for this project. Again, and even if you go with the first one, I like how you targeted it for the student versus the parent that way, because the interventions are going to be different, what you're going to discuss with each population, or how you would gear it for each one, the student versus the teacher. I think that digital tool for organizing schoolwork, that certainly could be helpful for a student, regardless of the pandemic. That could carry over. That would be a great strategy for kids in general who have difficulty organizing their day, just can't seem to get it together. That it would probably be a great tool. I also like the interactive virtual classroom design. That's a great option for, I think, kids on remote learning, regardless if they have ADHD or not. I think all kids are missing out on that social interaction piece. And so certainly that's something that could be applied. So good job. I liked your interventions and I like your concepts. So thanks.
So I think you guys did an excellent job, and I echo what Dr. Gooden has said about your interventions and the things that you have, and I can see all three of those concepts being used. I was really intrigued by the classroom, just because we've spent the last, I don't know, year and a half virtually online and trying to engage everybody in participating in the class and recognizing how difficult it is. And some of the things that that we've had difficulty with, you identified, right? And had specific places to go for individual work versus collaborative work, and put a place in there so that they could talk to the teacher and set up that video call, where we know, like just in Teams itself, right? We can certainly be on a video call and have an individual chat going in another, not even with the call that you're dealing with, and how distracting that can be, and then really kind of focusing them. So I thought it was really a neat idea.
Yeah, I think that there's a couple of it feels a little at times a little Big Brother-ish, but I think you might need to be Big Brother-ish with people that have this condition. You know, a monitoring system, keep people on track. So maybe in this case, Big Brother is a positive thing. The avatars, when I first saw them, I wrote a note to myself as, why is this essential? But as you started to go through it, and as Eileen just said, it's really interesting to think about what the virtual classroom is going to be in the future versus now, where if I see it the way you're doing it, I can tell where people's heads are, you know, that they don't want to be disturbed. I'm working alone, or I'm collaborating. Right now, like when we're working with teams, we have channels in the general, and it's almost like the difference between DOS and the Mac operating system. You know, it's like in DOS, it was just lines of text and stuff, and that's how you did it. There was no visuals. And now we're in new operating systems where it's much more interactive and much more easy to use, and you can see where you want to go. So it kind of reminded me of that analogy. The first concept, I thought that was really good. There was a lot of different ways you could go inside of there, and you know, you could just package all this stuff up and have one big solution if you wanted to. But let's see where your validation goes and see what's hitting the mark. Good quality too. It was really nice to look at this and everything. So good work.
Thank you.
Okay, bars and restaurants are up, and vaccine distribution is after that.
Okay, I'm going to share my screen. Can you see that?
Yes.
Okay.
Awesome. So we'll go ahead and get started. Hello, my name is Mary, and I'm a part of the Restaurants and Bars Focus Group presenting today with my teammates Savannah and Lindsay. And then we began this project with research, and with our research performed interviews, we had the opportunity to talk to a wide variety of stakeholders holding many positions within the restaurant and bar industry. We talked to a catering delivery driver, a cocktail server, a manager, an assistant general manager, a bouncer, and a bartender. From those interviews, we were able to identify 4 overarching pain points affecting the bulk of the people we talked to. The first is the time spent in thoroughly cleaning dining spaces that is now required of staff, having to handle unmasked patrons, especially those under the influence, enforcing mask regulations, and dealing with being short-staffed.
So based on the main points, we have come up with main interventions that we will go in more in depth with in later slides. The main interventions include reducing the contact time between employees and customers to limit the risk of spreading COVID and other viruses or diseases, enhancing the employees' voice volume to help accommodate hard of hearing individuals, utilizing a more effective physical barrier around customers' parties to prevent spreading COVID or other viruses to employees and other customers around them. Improving air circulation and purification within a given area to prevent the spread of COVID-19 among customers and staff, and incorporating surfaces which are easy to clean and able to be sanitized. This allows a decrease of the spread of COVID-19 by common cleaning methods and not utilizing material that makes cleaning more difficult for staff.
Yeah, so our first concept is a communication device. This device would serve the purpose of minimizing physical contact between the waitstaff and guest. The device would serve as a means of verbal communication between staff and guests through the meal. Much like a Teams or WebEx call, this platform would provide guests with the ability to virtually raise a hand. This would notify their waiter of their needs. It would also be a platform for viewing the menu and ordering food. And ultimately, at the end of the meal, this would be the device used for payment.
And then as we look at some of the instruction that would come along with the communication tablet,
Some of the things that we would need to look at would be the verbal commands that would allow you to talk to the communication device itself, using a voice recognition similar to that of like Siri or Alexa in order to guide communication. And there would also be a call button available on screen to notify a waiter or waitress, printed instructions on the side of the device for either a charger or a battery pack of some kind, and how to change that. And then a small pamphlet would also be given to employers regarding the features with a brief description of each one. Again, with pamphlets and like different instruction manuals, sometimes those get tossed to the side, but if it's like a very brief description and it's easy to read and very informative within a small amount of text, hopefully that would be more usable and user-friendly. And then on each table, we would want to post some easy commands to start conversation with this particular device for user or consumer use. And then the employees would also be given initial training sessions. Now, of course, this would come as a cost and may be difficult to implement, especially in some of the restaurants or bars that have been kind of hit hard with the pandemic. But it would definitely be an offered service. And then easy access references, again, kind of going along the lines of the pamphlet with a brief description, just for reference use in case of like a waiter or waitress has difficulty. It would either be in a pamphlet format or accessible on their specific device. And then some of the considerations that we need to take into account when we create this are the literacy or ability for tablet use among consumers, recognizing different voice dialects and accents of certain kinds, user-friendly designs, ability to move around the table freely but without obstructing the table space, preventing the clients or the customers from taking or leaving with the tablet, the size of the display and making it readable and then loud enough for those with different visual or hearing impairments, making it easy to clean, affordable, and then also there were concerns regarding like tips and monetary compensation for restaurant and bar workers work, since they're not directly engaging like face-to-face with the customers.
So for the tablet communication system, we have come up with a timeline that would occur. So first, the customer would come in and set up the assigned table. Customers are greeted by the tablet, asked if they would like to order or browse the menu. Then once the order is placed, the chef is notified and the waiter or waitress brings drinks. Then the customers get updates as food cooks and can make requests as needed. Customers will get notified when food is done or when the waiter or waitress is preparing to bring it out. On the waiter or waitress's device, they can see what each customer or table needs and complete the checklist of requests. Waiter or waitress can make a single trip to the table with all requested materials. Customers finish food and pay using the device, and then waiter or waitress is notified when a customer pays and gets reminded to clean the table.
All right. So our second concept, similarly to the first, would serve as a means of verbal communication between the staff and guests throughout the meal. This concept focuses in more on the waitstaff's role in communication. Ultimately, this design improves and builds upon a face mask in consideration of the amount of time the waitstaff wears the mask. A mic would be built into the structure, and it has the ability to cast audio to a selected Bluetooth speaker on a table in the restaurant, or simply amplify the waitstaff's voice through a speaker located on the front of the mask. Through a connected app, the server would have the ability to select which table they wish to speak to, as well as be notified of the table's needs or called by the table. This concept also presents an opportunity for the kitchen to notify the waiter or waitress of the situation or of the status of their guest meal.
And then again, for instruction on this particular concept, there would be the idea of the removable microphones, so that each employee has their own, and then the masks can be either disposed of or properly cleaned or sanitized. So there would have to be some sort of instruction on the microphone and then also on the speaker part of the mask. We would hope to have this printed on the inside of the mask, taking into account the amount of space available on the inside, and then the health literacy of workers and understanding the instruction. And then also with the download of the app, it would kind of walk through the instruction and kind of the capability use for the workers within the bar or restaurant. And then again, some of the considerations during this development would be the available space on the inside of the mask, with the different pieces of the mask, like the microphone or the speaker. And then with the mic being too close to the mouth and their voice sounding muffled, or the size or location to prevent it from going into their mouth. And then also looking at how like the breath humidity would affect the microphone. And then one of the other important considerations would be the weight of the mask and making sure that the microphone and the speaker aren't too heavy, which would make the mask fall down below the nose. And then the app development and creating a user-friendly design.
All right. Our third concept looks at the tables within the restaurant. So this is a pod that would surround the table and have built-in air filtration at the top, bringing clean air in through the bottom of the pod and filtering and expelling the contaminated air through the top. Additional sanitizing would be done for the surfaces inside the pod, coming from the pod walls and being activated on a timer, reducing the staff's cleaning time and decreasing their worry about people being unmasked while seated. Both forms have an opening at the bottom of the pod, allowing fresh air to be brought inside. As seen in blue, the vent near the top would expel the exhaled air out of the pod through a series of filters and back into the open. The green lines represent the air disinfection, which would possibly be triggered or activated by detection of a period of no movement. Single room air purifiers could be a nice idea for our pods as well. They're not too expensive and fairly quiet. However, they're made for being set on the floor, and there is often no room for that inside of a pod. But if we go with this idea, we could look at redesigning one to fit in the center of the pod's top section. We also looked at range hood type air movement. This method is very effective and can move heavier particles, but it's also very loud. The fan speed can be changed to reduce the noise level to one zone, which is very quiet, but in doing so, the filtration becomes less effective. Since COVID, airline workers have been disinfecting cabins with foggers that are highly effective in killing COVID and other diseases, and it's safe for people to be around, requiring no wait time after application. Our application of this idea would be similar in effectiveness, except the device would be smaller and attached to the pod wall. The system would be timed to guarantee that the pod is empty during the spray, but guests would be able to be seated almost immediately after the table was sanitized.
So the table pod purpose is to confine the air and environment of small or large parties to improve ventilation and prevent spread of COVID. Employees will need to be instructed on how to operate the filtration system and disinfect the pod. Customers will need to be instructed on how to keep themselves within the table pod in order to reduce the risk of spread of COVID. Some considerations during the development are what the pod size will be and how accurate or efficient the ventilation will be, especially for larger parties. How loud will the ventilation be? Would it be distracting for the customers? How frequently would the filters need to be changed out, and if they would need to be cleaned? Would they need to be potentially hire a company to regularly clean them or change them and teach the staff to operate it? So those are our current 3 concepts, and in the next phase, through surveys, we will begin working towards narrowing them down. Does anyone have any questions?
Good job, guys. I like all 3 of your concepts. I think each one has pros and cons. You're just going to have to really, I think, once you guys go through the validation process, I think that might be the most effective in kind of determining which final direction you want to take. What's going to be really like the best of all of this, options for the restaurant and bar industry, especially the people you talk to. But I think you've got 3 viable options.
Yeah, I agree. I'm glad that you added that mask. I think that was a good, like, close to home addition to put in there. And the reason I like it is because all your restaurant employees are going to have a relationship to that mask. Whatever that they had to go through to get through COVID involved a mask. And if they can think back on what it was that would make this better, and you're offering some solutions that are restaurant and employee specific, which I think is really good. It's a niche for sure, but it's one that's needed because they're having to wear it longer. So I think that's good. The other ones were also good. So I think you've landed on 3 good topics, and like Janine is saying, it's just a matter of what we find out in validation. I think on your illustrations, you could be a little bit more clear, and it seemed like there was a lot of like the text and stuff was fighting the imagery. So you may have to have 2 or 3 more images, less text, a little bit neater. But the concepts are definitely there. And let's see what we get in validation.
Okay. Okay.
Okay. Next group, vaccine distribution. And I believe that's our last group.
Yep.
Yep. Very last ones.
Last but certainly not least.
Can you guys see my screen?
Yeah, we got some chatter in the background somewhere.
All right, I'll just take it outside real quick. Sorry, I'm at my soon-to-be in-laws. Is that better?
Yeah, that's perfect.
Okay, whenever you're ready.
We are ready when you are. So this is our education concepts.
All right, so I'm going to get started, and I'm going to speak about the interventions and our concepts for increasing COVID-19 vaccination rates. So first off, for the problems we identified, an estimated 70% of the U.S. population would need to be vaccinated in order to achieve herd immunity. And herd immunity occurs when a large portion of the community or the herd becomes immune to a disease, making the spread of the disease from person to person unlikely. And as a result, the whole community becomes protected, not just those who are immune. So currently the COVID-19 death rate in the United States, it stands at 592,776 people who have died from COVID-19. And the vaccination rates are at a 45.8% of the US population in total being vaccinated. And that statistic is fully vaccinated, not just the first dose. And so then the other issue, you can go to the next slide, please, that we've identified is not just the vaccination rates, but also the long-term side effects from those who do contract COVID-19. So there's some common signs and symptoms that linger after contracting COVID-19, which include like fatigue, shortness of breath, difficulty breathing, joint pain, loss of taste and smell, and et cetera. You can see the rest listed there. And then there's also, in addition to that, long-term complications, which are being identified for those who do get COVID-19. And it can be some of these lingering signs and symptoms, as well as organ damage, blood clots, blood vessel problems, problems with mood and fatigue, and then still others that are unknown that are being investigated. So our target population we identified is ages 18 to 49, and this just encompasses the lowest groups that have been vaccinated at this time. And this population tends to be the group of people that are able to recover from COVID-19, which could be contributing to their choice to not get vaccinated. So they might feel that they won't be as severely affected if they were to contract COVID-19. So similarly, we found this same finding when we completed our surveys, and the consensus among people in this age range when we did the surveys was that they didn't feel they would gain anything if they were to get vaccinated. So our aim is just to provide vaccine education information, including why vaccines are important, and not only for personal health, but also to benefit stopping the spread of COVID-19, and specifically offering protection for those whose lives could be negatively impacted by COVID-19. Next slide, please.
Is Erica here?
Yeah, sorry, I wasn't unmuted. So this is just the basics of how vaccinations work. What comprises vaccines can vary, but they all work the same way, and that they stimulate an immune response from the immune system, and then that produces antibodies. So exactly as it would if the body was exposed to an actual pathogen, which could be a virus or bacteria, in this case, a virus. And then after vaccination occurs, the body develops immunity to the disease without having to get the disease first. So that's why prevention is so important, so that people can avoid those long-term complications. Next slide. So there's two different types of COVID-19 vaccinations currently. The first is the mRNA, which this is what Pfizer and Moderna are. So how they work, mRNA delivers instructions into the immune cells, and then the cells use those instructions to make a protein piece. And once that protein piece is made, then the cells break down and gets rid of the mRNA, and then the cell displays a protein piece on the surface, and then the immune system recognizes that foreign protein, and that triggers the immune response to build antibodies. And then the immune system can now protect against the future infection. So what to know about this? It is a new type of vaccine, but I'll talk more about that on the next slide. It offers instructions for our cells on how to make a protein that triggers the immune response, which I explained above. And those vaccinated can gain protection. Sorry, my screen just went black. So those vaccinated can gain protection without risking the serious consequences of actually getting COVID. And these last two are really important. The live virus that causes COVID-19 is not used in the production. So no one is getting COVID-19 from getting this vaccination. And it does not affect our DNA in any way. So that was from our surveys, like some people were concerned about it altering our DNA, and it does not do that. So mRNA vaccines, they are new, but they're not unknown. Researchers have been working with mRNA for decades now. And they're kind of a hot topic because they can be made in the laboratory with readily available materials. And the process is standardized. So that allows for faster vaccination production. Sorry, my screen keeps turning black for some reason. So the COVID mRNA vaccination research began as soon as researchers had the necessary information, so basically right away. And beyond vaccines, the mRNA has been used in cancer research to trigger immune system to target specific cancer cells. And then you can go to the next slide. So this is the viral vector type of vaccine. This is what Johnson & Johnson is. So what to know about this one, it uses a modified version of a different virus, which they call a vector, to deliver instructions to the cells. And then those vaccinated gain protection without, I said this before, without getting, risking the serious consequences of actually getting COVID. It cannot give someone COVID-19 or any other infection, and it does not affect our DNA in any way again. So how this one works, the vector enters a cell in the body. The vector uses the cell's machinery to produce a harmless piece known as a spike protein of the virus that causes COVID-19, and then the cell displays that spike protein, and that starts the immune system response to build the antibodies.
Okay, so my slide is over the Moderna vaccination. Just we felt that informing our, I guess, audience of what each type, along with, like Erica explained, what type of the vaccine is, but also like further side effects and what it does and does not contain, because a lot of people were worried about, well, I'm allergic to this. And some vaccinations in the past have contained, for example, eggs. This Moderna one does not. You have to get 2 shots 1 month apart. From some of the research I did, that they said that beforehand, like at 24 days or something, it was less effective. The FDA has authorized the emergency use of the Moderna vaccine to prevent COVID-19 in individuals that are 18 years of age and older. So this differed from some of the other vaccines as their ages were younger compared to this one. This one you must be an adult, and this one has, from what I saw, one of the higher rates of effectiveness with 94.1. And when I got this vaccination, I had all of these side effects. So they were pretty accurate with their listings of side effects on this vaccination of arm pain, tiredness, headache, muscle pain, chills, fever, and nausea. The side effects usually start within a day or two of getting the vaccine, and they might feel like flu-like symptoms and might even affect the ability to do daily activities, or for some, even getting out of bed.
Okay, so for the Pfizer vaccine, it again is an mRNA vaccine. It's 2 shots, and these shots are 21 days apart. Again, like Brooke had said with Moderna, it does not contain eggs, preservatives, or latex, so there's not a concern there for allergies. And it is has been approved for emergency use for.
Team, you're at 10 minutes. So pick it up.
Slow and steady wins the race.
Okay, so it's been approved for individuals age 12 and older, and it's got a 95% effective rate at preventing COVID-19. You can see the possible side effects. Again, they usually happen within 1 to 2 days, and it's just a normal immune response. I personally had this one and did not have any side effects. So it just goes to show that depending on the individual will depend on kind of how the side effects in the vaccine impacts them. Next slide, please.
This is Johnson & Johnson, again, the viral vector shot. This one is you only get 1 shot. Everything is really similar to the 2 previous ones, except for this one is only recommended for individuals 18 years and older. And then I do want to point out that everyone's very concerned about the blood clots. It is a rare side effect. Blood clots with low platelets occurs at a rate of 7 in 1 million women between the ages 18 and 49. And then it's even more rare for men and women older than 50. But I do want to point out that earlier when we talked about the lasting effects of COVID-19, if you get COVID-19, you're at an increased risk of blood clots, period, just from having it. So you can go to the next one.
So also from our survey, we noticed that a lot of people were concerned with how the vaccine would be effective with variants of COVID-19. From a lot of my research, I found that the Delta variant, which is like the most popular right now, was not, I guess the proper way to say it, was like supported by like the CDC or WHO, like reputable websites. It was more about a lot of news and social media websites. So from what I found, no variants of high consequence have been identified in the U.S. So it's mainly been overseas. And then from one of the news articles, I did find they said that it was first detected in India, and it got its name from the WHO website, which means notable variants after the letters of the Greek alphabet. But like I said, not a whole lot of information came from CDC or WHO, so it didn't sound extremely concerning from their point of view, but more so from social media and the news websites.
All right, we'll run through these as fast as we can. Rich, do you want to do this one just real quick? You're muted. I can also just, you got it.
Thank you.
Yep.
So this was a mini documentary, and it was a live action 8 to 10 minute setting in Ohio, and it's just basically just a story about somebody who's just a college age person. It's based off of a real actual story of somebody who had no previous health issues, and he died from COVID.
The second one, so all of our concepts are looking at education around the vaccine and COVID-19 and how, because a lot of people were looking for more data, more education, looking at side effects, what those possibly are. So this would be like an interactive ad or an application. So people would come in and it would ask them a quick question, like a game, like, I don't know what percentage of people have had side effects to the vaccine. And then you'd answer it and it'd be a quick thing if it was on Spotify, or it'd be a longer interactive app that you could go in and learn more and more about COVID-19. However, the hard thing with this is if someone is opposed to learning more about the vaccine or doesn't really want to get vaccinated in the first place, why would they actually go download this app? So accessibility was a lot more of a challenge. So what we did with that is we're creating our big concepts. We can jump to the next slide. Our concepts are focusing around a short educational animation on the differences between like COVID-19 and getting the vaccine. So this would be 3 to 5 minutes max. And it could be a YouTube link or a short video that would be shared locally, because at this point, there are so many different videos and educational tools out there that people there's so much, no one knows who to listen to, but people will still listen to their primary care doctors and community leaders. So this information would come from them to their people and be a more trustworthy source of information. But looking at this storyboard really quick, it would follow a woman in her 20s. So she's pretty healthy, has no side effects. I'm going as fast as I can here, but she'd been quarantining, and then the mask mandate gets lifted, and this directly compares her life if she got the vaccination and if she got COVID instead. So it zooms inside the body, compares what exactly happens to the cells, what we were talking about with the vaccinations. They don't enter the DNA. Then it would talk about if you got COVID, you'd have to quarantine for 10 days, but if you got the vaccine, then you could be out doing your normal activities. The COVID itself creates variants and spreads and kills people you don't even know, even if your friends don't get sick. Whereas getting the vaccine, you save everyone and create that herd immunity. And then jumping to 3 months later, we are looking at we know 3 months later what COVID does to the body and long COVID. We don't know the side effects to the vaccine, but so far none have been found besides the blood clots, but that is so minimal. We're not trying to draw attention to that. The second one, same information, but focuses more on the negative side effects of COVID itself, because that's what we know, and then jumps to the vaccine fast facts. And then the last one is just a really deep dive into exactly what is happening to your cells with the vaccination, and then jumps to herd immunity and how can you save the world if you get vaccinated. Ta-da, sweet. All right, that's what I got.
And then we did 2 more concepts that one of the professors had prompted us to do more of a story and kind of touch on people's emotions a little bit. And then so this one would be like just an average person who's out playing basketball with his friends, and his friend asks about whether or not he's been vaccinated, and he says, "No, I'm healthy." And so he's like, "Well, what about, like, don't you have a young niece who's immunocompromised? How would you feel if you gave her COVID-19 and she's not really old enough to get the vaccine yet, so you need to get the vaccine. Here's why, because if like a variant comes about or you're not helping for herd immunity, and then so it'll ultimately end with him getting vaccination, get vaccinated, save lives slogan. And then the final one was somebody who it'll kind of walk through a middle-aged man who's concerned about blood clots and like painful side effects. And then one of his friends said, "Well, do you know what the side effects of COVID are?" And so he walks through like not being able to smell for a long time or blood clots themselves, etc. And then some statistics will come in about the vaccine, and then it'll be like an overlay of like the consequences of COVID itself versus the consequences of the vaccine itself, sitting on top of each other so you can kind of see through them. And then it'll be information on how it's common to have side effects from the virus and rare to have it from the vaccine. Then at the end, it'll be like Save America, vaccinate everyone. So like a save slogan. Thank you, guys.
All right, that was a whirlwind, but there you go.
You're gonna probably want to have that back up. Eileen, do you have any comments?
My first thought is that it's very timely in putting this together. I think I need a couple minutes just to kind of think through the information that was presented and whether or not.
I guess for me, yeah, like for me, it's hard to like. It's like there was 2 presentations. I didn't feel like there was a blended presentation. I'm not sure how the first half of it informed the second half of it.
So
the second half of it informed the first part of it, and I'm not sure what.
Design Studio, COVID prevention.
So a lot of our project is education, as you can see.
Because every year we do a collaborative studio with the nurses and the allied health sciences.
This year's perfect.
And this year was COVID prevention.
Are you talking to us, Luke?
No, I'm not. My bad.
Okay.
I just muted them.
So a lot of our project is education. So that's why I feel like a lot of it was more so of like the nurses side talking. But we described what we wanted Russell and Rachel to put in either the short film or we ended up going with like an idea of an animation. So everything that we talked about is what they're going to include in the animation or the film that we want to present at either like a doctor's office, or we talked about an interactive ad on Spotify. So all the information we included, the different types of vaccines, what mRNA means, like all of that will be in the film. And I don't know if maybe we should just put that in one of our slides, like this is going to be an interactive ad, or this is going to be, all this education is going to be in a short film. But
I guess I must have missed that part of it, because I don't remember hearing that this content that we're presenting is going to be included in the concepts or the film.
okay. I guess from us, like we just thought that was what we were supposed to present, was just what we were doing was going to be into the graphic designs portion, but maybe that was just us assuming. Do you know what I mean? Like from presenting, from us making it.
I think
Well,
it also.
Our intervention is education, so we gave the interventions and listed out how we would, provide that education. And like Brooke said, it would then be implemented into the animation or whatever the designers end up, implementing with these concepts.
How does the team see that this is going to be rolled out to the 18 to 49-year-old people? Now, is it 18 to 49-year-old all social economic blanket 18 to 49, or is there
I mean, we could narrow our demographic, but we decided to go with age instead of targeting like a specific race or something like that, because we feel like it was a bigger target market that we would catch. So that was we discussed this like in our last class of kind of how to reach our target population.
But okay,
creating. Go for it.
For that age group, what are your strategies okay, you do an animation or a movie or whatever it is, how does it get traction in those age groups? I mean, that's a pretty big span of age groups and interests, a 50-year-old compared to somebody that maybe just got into college.
Well, like we said before, we were going to have it in like an interactive ad. So, for example, myself and my father, who's just turned 50, both use the app Spotify for our music. So if we want to continue listening after an hour, we're required to listen to this ad first before we can continue listening. So they have to listen to our animation before they can continue listening to their music. So our animation will pop up. But we also talked about having it play at like a doctor's office or like on YouTube. A lot of people use that, or just a commercial that plays like through on TV, as that will hit most of our general population, as everyone in college and majority of people listen to music or watch TV or go to the doctor, I guess.
I was talking to Chris this morning about the age group, and this morning we had it narrowed down a little more, and I was talking to him, and he was like, well, an animation is pretty much something that's universal across the board. You should just keep your age group open. So he said to keep it quite wide, and then the other way to give it traction that Russell and I were talking about is like maybe at the doctor's office you have like a QR code handout that just like you take your phone, you take a picture of it, and it'll bring up that animation and it'll walk you through it, because like a doctor is like a more trusted source. And so if your doctor says, here, check out this video, this is good information and this is what you need to know about it, and then it'll gain ground that way, in which case a general physician sees patients from the ages of 18 up through 70. Like it could be any age.
Well, I guess that would have been good to understand it in the presentation.
Yeah, we should have put that in there. We were kind of in a rush in the end.
The last thing I want to add is that if we targeted a very specific population, it could look like we are skewing each of these individual animations to like persuade a group to think a certain way or to go get the vaccination. But we want to keep it as objective as possible. So we're presenting the data we know on COVID-19. We're presenting the data we know on the vaccination as like strictly data, but in a way where a person can watch this animation in a very short, concise way, follow the story, see the direct comparison between getting the vaccination and not getting the vaccination, and then making the decision on their own. And talking more about long COVID and how after you get COVID-19, there are more side effects than if you get the vaccination, because side effects were a huge issue to most people. And if you get COVID, there's more known data around COVID itself than there is around the vaccination.
I guess one last thing for me is that you all are the experts on this at this point. I'm not. I'm just going by what I'm hearing. And then from Rachel and Russell, you were telling me that the most beneficial group of people to get vaccinated are a lower income group of people that are either have misconceptions or aren't getting the word, aren't being educated correctly. And so for the last few times that we've been talking about that, and you've been talking about going with community leaders and pastors and to promote your video. So, I mean, that's where I just have a little disconnect. So
I think we have a miscommunication.
We have a massive miscommunication. We only tossed around the idea of low income at the very beginning of the semester. We're still tossing around the community leaders. Sorry, go on, Russell.
Okay. Well,
No,
I mean, if that's the case, that's fine. But we've been talking, and that's what I got out of our discussions.
Gotcha. Well, yeah, we're still definitely talking about, because hyperlocal is what's necessary in order to build trust between the people and the information that they're receiving. So I think the community leaders, the pastors, the teachers, the educators, the physicians are the mode where we need to get this animation to the people. However, low income is just one piece of this puzzle, and we're trying to get everyone vaccinated.
Okay.
Hopefully that helps a little bit.
And another way to phrase that is just vulnerable populations, not just low income or whatever. You can just say underserved populations or vulnerable populations. That is an important demographic to focus on. But again, it really, I think you're on the right track with regard to making it such that, you know, the information you're giving is what is known, so that the actual knowledge is passed along to everybody. It can be palatable to all age demographics and all socioeconomic, sociopolitical situations, because what you're trying to do is basically provide knowledge, right? So I think if you stick with that particular track, you identify the need for certain underserved or vulnerable populations as a demographic itself, and then also look into, you know, regular populations that may be more driven against getting a vaccination, that don't have those vulnerable or underserved problems, but maybe more of a politically driven mindset. You can look at those as individual secondary pain points, if you will, as far as things. And the paper that we read about that from the New England Journal, talking about beyond politics and the difficulty in this next curve, now that we've hit over 50%, this next group of 30% of patients is going to be a completely different problem to solve, because there's a different reason behind why those folks aren't getting vaccinated than the initial early adopters and those that have gotten vaccinated up to this point. That's an important consideration. But I think from what I saw this morning, you're on the right track. You just need to clarify your rhetoric a bit.
Definitely. Thank you, Chris.
Sounds good.
Janine, do you have anything you want to add?
I don't think so at this time. I think that you've addressed a lot of many of the concerns that I shared as well. I think the concepts are good. We've got good start here, good ideas. You just want to make it connect. You want to make it flow, make sure the interventions match the concept. You can probably combine some of these too. But I agree with Chris as far as the use of the term vulnerable populations, because that's going to capture your where our target audience needs to be. And that's going to include more than just lower socioeconomics. It's going to include everyone in that category. So I think you're right. So Good luck. Yes, let's see what happens.
Thank you.
Okay, well, I think that kind of wraps up everything. Everybody, great job. I think our next phase here is we're going into validation, and what you need to do is fine tune your concepts based on our talks, and really look at how you're going to interlock those interventions and those concepts and present them out to a group of people that can give you feedback. The design students in another class have been working on putting together a survey, so I'm assuming that they've been communicating with the nursing students, and so they can start to see those soon. We have, I believe, a week in order to get our feedback, our stuff, our surveys distributed and our feedback back and tabulated and visualized for our next presentation. So you're going to have to develop questions around your concepts and interventions, and get those out to people to understand which concepts are hitting home. We're going to want to see evidence of where you posted these, what forums, what Facebook groups, what social groups that you were able to get your surveys out to, and the results from those. Janine, you want to add anything?
Sorry, I had to unmute.
All right.
Just looking at my notes, I make sure that you're, well, next week we'll spend time in class on that interview guide, looking at that questionnaire, looking at our pain points, making sure that everything is summarized. You want to look at how you're stating it. Are you asking the questions that you want to ask? Are they clear? Are they able to, look at comparing and contrasting your concepts? So that way this is where we go before we head into the final direction. So it's really important that everything is, you look over, that you communicate between design and nursing, that there's good communication there, and that you guys are all on board. So it's my understanding that we'll have a lot of work time next week together in class.
Yep.
To do this, right?
Yeah, their presentation is on the Wednesday, July 8th.
For the other class?
Is that right?
No. Next week is July 6th. That's our class day.
Right. So no, sorry. It's the 13th. The presentation is on the 13th, but we're going to start on doing refinements on the 8th, because we should be pretty much wrapped up by that time. So we're going to do a little overlap.
Okay.
On week 9 and 10.
So just so the students have enough time, Steve, let's kind of just brainstorm real quick. If we're having a work day next Tuesday, all the students will have time to work together to build their interview guide and questionnaire. Will that be enough time?
Well, I'm thinking that they should be doing their interview guide and everything now, and working on that as homework, and being ready to send it out, by the weekend.
All the design teams as of this morning have already come up with their initial format. I had them do that over the last week, so they have a rough guide for that already in process. It's just a matter of the nursing and the design students collaborating and honing and modifying what they already have. So they're already on the ground running at this point.
Well, that's good to know, Chris. Thank you for sharing that. So